Welcome to the deep dive.
Okay, so when most people think about high-stakes poker, you probably picture, smoke-filled rooms, maybe some quick math, a bit of luck,
Yeah.
a really dramatic bluff.
Yeah, the Hollywood version.
Exactly. But you, our listener, sent in some fantastic sources asking something, well, much deeper, basically. How on earth do professional poker players handle the intense stress and, honestly, the brutal, long hours that just define their jobs?
And it's such a great question because looking through this research, it completely flips the script, doesn't it?
It really does.
These sources show that high-stakes poker now, it's less about just pure math or raw skill. It's really an endurance test. It's a mental battlefield. And long-term success. It seems to hang entirely on managing stress, cognitive endurance, and critically, avoiding that self-sabotage they call tilt. Okay, let's really unpack this. Our mission here is pretty clear. We need the inside track. We want to pull out those specific routines, the actual techniques, the almost athletic mindsets these pros use to stay sharp, stay calm under fire, and just keep going during these marathon sessions. We're talking 14, 16, sometimes even 20 hours in big tournaments.
Right. And to start, I think we need to really understand the environment. Why is poker stress so uniquely damaging compared to, say, regular job?
Yeah, that's a good point. If you've got a 9 to 5, even a tough one, there's usually a rhythm, right? A start, a finish, a clock. But these sources kept bringing up this idea of relentless uncertainty at the poker table.
Precisely. Unlike a normal job where, your effort generally leads to some kind of predictable outcome, poker just doesn't offer that. You can play perfectly, make all the right moves for 8 hours straight, and still lose money because of, well, bad luck or variance. And that uncertainty, it's incredibly stressful. But players describe it as like a full system breakdown, not just mental
Do you
tension.
mean physically?
Yeah, absolutely physiological stress. We're talking heart pounding, shallow breathing, that tension building up in your neck and shoulders with every single big decision. It's visceral. And then you layer on those marathon sessions, 8, 12, 16 hours. You're just running on mental fumes at that point. When does skill kind of drop off and pure endurance just take over?
Well, the pros are pretty clear about this. After about 6 hours of really intense focus, the game itself starts to change.
How so?
It stops being primarily about finding the absolute perfect strategy and becomes much more about just maintaining focus and, crucially, avoiding mistakes. Mental fatigue kicks in hard and it erodes your decision-making. That's when players get really susceptible to the thing they dread most.
Tilt.
Right, tilt. We hear that term all the time. Let's give it the deep dive treatment, though. It sounds like it's more than just being mad about losing a hand. It sounds almost like a cognitive crash.
It is, basically. Tilt is that state where emotional frustration may be triggered by a really tough, bad beat, where you lose a huge pot even though you played it right, just completely overwhelms your rational thinking.
So it's not just feeling upset.
No, it's a critical failure in cognitive control. And it leads to this cascade of errors. You stop making mathematically sound choices and start falling back on really destructive biases. Things like, I got to win back what I lost, or making wild plays out of frustration or even revenge.
Okay, so the stress and the fatigue directly fuel these really expensive, irrational decisions. If the game itself is basically designed to induce that stress, how do they actively fight back? This must be where the mental gym comes in, right? The stuff they do away from the table.
Exactly. And this is where the strategies get really quite sophisticated. It goes beyond just standard mindfulness. Top pros use these highly structured visualization techniques.
And you're saying it's not just about picturing yourself winning big hands or pulling off a great bluff?
Not primarily, no. It seems the real power isn't in trying to avoid the emotional spike altogether, but more in, draining its power before it happens. The sources mentioned specific daily practices for this.
How does that work in practice?
Well, they dedicate time, maybe 10 to 15 minutes each day, to mentally rehearse high-pressure situations. And importantly, especially the bad stuff, bad beats, unexpected moves from opponents, tricky spots. The goal is to build sort of neural pathways for neutrality. So when that tough situation actually happens at the table, the brain's kind of preconditioned, it recognizes it, I've processed this scenario before, and it dampens that immediate, powerful stress response from the amygdala, that fight or flight thing.
It's like cognitive inoculation. You practice handling the bad stuff, so when it hits for real, it doesn't completely derail you.
That's a great way to put it. And then this resilience they build up is supported by having immediate reset buttons they can hit during the actual game. The idea is to break that frustration feedback loop before it spirals into full-blown tilt.
Okay, reset buttons. What's a really effective, maybe even counterintuitive reset button you saw mentioned?
One thing that came up quite a bit was the deliberate use of small physical actions,
Mm-hmm.
like just taking a minute to actually step away from the table
Okay.
or doing a quick stretch, even something as simple as going to watch your hands.
Mm-hmm.
The point isn't really to solve the poker problem in that moment. It's to force a physical pause, engage your senses with something totally different, and then come back to your seat with even just a slightly renewed focus.
Okay, I get the theory, but does it really work? If you're, say, 10 hours into a massive tournament, millions potentially on the line,
Hmm.
can washing your hands for 60 seconds actually reset your focus?
Right.
Or is that just, window dressing?
Well, that's where the preconditioning practice meets the in-the-moment tactic, right? It's probably not a magic cure-all, but it acts like a circuit breaker.
Okay.
And the sources emphasize these micro breaks are particularly crucial for players who are already actively tracking their own physiological state using technology.
Let's dive into that tech angle, because this seems like where the pro approach really differs. They're using tools that go way beyond just like a meditation app.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, sure, apps like Headspace or Calm are pretty standard for basic mental hygiene, kind of like brushing your teeth. But the real cutting edge seems to involve tracking internal metrics, things like smartwatches and fitness trackers.
But not just for steps.
No. They're specifically using them to monitor HRV heart rate variability.
Okay, tell us why HRV is the key metric here. What does it actually show?
So HRV measures the tiny little variations in the time between your heartbeats, and that variation is a really powerful indicator of the state of your autonomic nervous system, basically how stressed or recovered you are.
Right.
Low HRV often means your body is stuck in that stressed fight or flight mode, or maybe it hasn't fully recovered from yesterday's grind. Pros actually treat this number like a pregame signal.
Like a readiness check.
Exactly. A green light or a red light. If their HRV is too low before a session, they know they're walking in already compromised. They're going to be much more vulnerable to fatigue and tilt. So they might actually decide to postpone playing or at least shorten their planned session.
Wow, that's treating your mind like a really expensive piece of machinery that needs, pre-flight checks before you even switch it on.
Pretty much.
So if the mind is the engine, the body must be the fuel tank, right? How seriously do these players take their physical conditioning?
Oh, completely seriously. They absolutely treat themselves like high-performance athletes. They see a direct link between physical shape and mental capacity. Fitness is critical for stamina.
Okay, but how does lifting weights or running help you make a better call at the poker table after 14 hours?
It's all connected. Cardio, for instance, anything that boosts your aerobic fitness helps lessen the physical symptoms of stress. When a player faces a tough spot, if they're cardiovascularly fit, their heart rate spike will likely be lower, and crucially, it'll recover faster.
Okay, that makes sense. And strength training.
That helps maintain good core posture. Think about sitting in one spot for hours on end. Strength training reduces that chronic tension buildup, which prevents physical discomfort from bleeding over and distracting your mental focus.
Got it. And the nutrition strategy must be just as precise then. Focused on brain fuel, not just, calories.
It absolutely has to be. The research really emphasizes sustained energy and keeping blood sugar levels stable. So they prioritize meals rich in protein paired with complex carbohydrates.
Why complex carbs?
Because they provide that slow burn energy. They help prevent that awful energy crash that often hits around the 4 to 6 hour mark of a session. That's a real danger zone, a cognitive dip where players become really susceptible to chasing losses or just making lazy, incorrect folds.
And what are the big nutritional no-nos they actively try to avoid?
Well, skipping meals is apparently a huge red flag. It just tanks your concentration almost immediately. Relying too much on sugary snacks or, this is a big one, high doses of caffeine.
Caffeine.
Yeah, while a little might be okay, too much just ramps up stress and anxiety levels. It increases that physical and mental volatility that can lead straight into tilt. The goal is smooth, steady energy.
Okay, this all leads us to the absolute bedrock, the foundation that supports all this mental and physical effort. Sleep. We all know sleep is important, but what specific job does quality sleep do for a pro poker player?
It's basically the ultimate recovery tool. Nothing else comes close. No amount of skill or strategy practice can make up for poor sleep.
Really?
Absolutely. Quality sleep directly restores cognitive function. It helps repair the neural pathways you use for all that complex calculation and decision-making. It improves reaction time, decision speed, and maybe most importantly, it resets your baseline for emotional control. A sleep-deprived player is essentially starting their day already halfway towards tilt.
Wow. Okay, so what are their specific tactics, especially when big tournaments can run until like 4 or 5 in the morning? How do they maintain any kind of rhythm?
They focus relentlessly on consistency, even when the schedule itself is chaotic. So maintaining a strict bedtime routine is key: dark room, quiet, cool temperature. And then trying to get back onto their regular rhythm as quickly as possible after a late night. But tactically, their use of power naps is really interesting.
Ah, the strategic tournament nap. How do they optimize that?
It's very carefully scheduled. If they have a decent break between sessions, maybe an hour or two, they'll aim for a power nap of about 20 to 30 minutes.
Why that specific duration?
Because it's long enough to provide some mental clarity and restoration, but short enough to avoid falling into deep sleep cycles. Waking up from deep sleep can leave you feeling groggy and mentally sluggish. They call it sleep inertia.
Right, that fuzzy feeling.
Exactly. So they're optimizing mental recovery within a really narrow time window. It's incredibly precise.
That is just relentless optimization, isn't it? But okay, these isolated techniques are great, but they don't exist in a vacuum. This all has to be woven into a complete lifestyle structure, right? Let's look at the whole routine.
Yes, that holistic structure is really what seems to separate the players who have sustainable long-term careers from those who burn out. The daily routine is built around managing energy.
Can you give us an example structure?
Sure, a typical pros day might start with some light cardio or meditation, maybe checking their HRV. Midday could be for strategy review or study. The afternoon is usually the main playing session, but with those scheduled breaks built in. And the evening involves a cool-down period, maybe some stretching, and then strict adherence to that sleep hygiene we talked about.
It really sounds less like a stereotypical gambler and more like a, I don't know, a CEO managing a high-stakes hedge fund.
That's a pretty good analogy, actually.
And part of that management, maybe surprisingly to some, must be a serious focus on work-life balance, not just grinding poker 24/7.
Oh, absolutely essential, especially for dealing with the inevitable downswings, the variance, scheduling non-poker activities, having healthy social interactions. It keeps the cumulative stress from just overwhelming them. If poker is literally your entire existence, every losing streak feels like an existential crisis.
So those hobbies aren't just filler time. They're actually a necessary defense mechanism.
Definitely. Engaging in things totally unrelated to poker, whether it's casual meetups with friends, reading, music, cooking, whatever, it drastically lowers that mental stress load. It provides critical perspective and distance. So when they do return to the table, they feel genuinely refreshed, not just temporarily distracted.
Okay, let's try and tie all this back to some of the big names. We mentioned players like Daniel Negreanu, Phil Ivey. Are these guys just naturally cool under pressure, or are they living proof of this kind of ultra-disciplined approach?
Well, they're definitely seen as disciplined practitioners of these principles. Negreanu, for example, is quite famous for his rigorous daily meditation practice and very strict diet and sleep schedules. It's not optional for him, it's part of the job.
Right, and Ivy is often brought up in relation to his commitment to exercise and nutrition, reinforcing that idea that the physical side isn't secondary, it's integral.
Exactly. And the contrast the sources draw is probably the clearest takeaway for you listening. You see two pretty distinct paths emerge.
Which are?
On one hand, you have the burnt-out players. They often show signs like low HRV, they neglect sleep, they become really volatile and prone to tilt, and eventually their performance just tanks.
And the other path.
Versus the well-managed pros, these are the ones who maintain consistent focus, demonstrate superior emotional control, stick to those structured daily routines, and achieve that sustainable, often multi-decade success. The difference really seems to boil down to the system of self-management they implement.
So the ultimate lesson here, and this really goes way beyond just poker, doesn't it, is that mastering stress management is the actual difference maker. It separates elite performance from just being average. Integrating mindfulness, specific nutrition, those strategic breaks, and especially that technical mental conditioning, that seems to be the line between bringing out and building real resilience.
I think the key takeaway for you is this. The truly professional player treats their mind like an incredibly valuable, finely tuned asset. And like any valuable asset, it requires very specific physical and mental upkeep. If you synthesize everything we've discussed, it becomes clear. A calm, disciplined mind supported by a well-rested, well-fueled body. That is, without a doubt, the best possible hand you can hold in poker.
Yeah, I keep coming back to that visualization technique, the idea of spending 10 or 15 minutes daily mentally rehearsing failure, rehearsing bad beats, specifically to neutralize the emotional sting. It's just so deliberate and kind of counterintuitive.
It really is. And this leads us to the final, maybe provocative thought we want to leave you with. Let's draw that analogy directly back to your own life.
Go.
Since these elite players mentally rehearse failure and setbacks to strip them of their emotional power, ask yourself this. What predictable, stressful scenario exists in your professional or personal life? Maybe it's a difficult meeting, a recurring confrontation, facing a potential major setback. Could you spend just 10 minutes a day mentally rehearsing that specific scenario,
Yeah.
practicing your calm response, your measured decision-making? Could doing that actually reduce its power over you when it happens for real? Something to think about how you can start building your own mental battlefield preparations.
That's a really powerful idea for building resilience in any field. Fantastic insights. Thank you for diving deep with us today.